County Republican Party. And Deanna Cole Bickham is the president of the Jackson County Republican Women. So this is a 3 Republican event hosted for you guys tonight. This is a forum, it's not a debate, so we have allocated enough time, we hope, for everyone to be able to speak for 6 minutes, address you all. We do have microphones that I hope will be working. And then every candidate will get a question which was submitted in advance by members of one of the clubs, and we've sort of grouped them by topics. So Deanna will be introducing the candidates, and Brian will be asking the questions. There'll be a general question first, and depending on how much time it takes to answer that question, you might get another question, and the follow-up questions I think will be more specific. So let's see. Oh, and I'll be the timekeeper. I have my kitchen timer right here.
And can you hear me now? Thank you. Okay, our first speaker will be, as we said, Congressman Stephen Palazzo. He is a lifelong Mississippian residing in Gulfport. He has a VA, an MPA from University of Southern Mississippi. He is a CPA by occupation. He's a Persian Gulf War veteran with a 3rd Force Reconnaissance Unit of the Marine Corps Reserve, currently serving with the Mississippi Army National Guard. He's in the Mississippi House of Representatives from 2006. He is a U.S. House of Representatives 4th Congressional District 2012 to present, member of the Armed Services Committee, Science, Space, and Technology Committee, chair of the Subcommittee on Space and Aeronautics, married with 3 children. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Palazzo.
All right, go. Start the clock.
I did.
Well, all right, listen, it's great to be here tonight. Thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedule. I want to thank the Jackson County Republican Women and Jackson County Republican Club for putting on this little candidate forum. I want to thank the candidates as well for being here. It's always good to hear from the candidates. I'd like to say 4 years ago, you elected me to go to Washington, D.C. and fight the liberal agenda that Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, and Barack Obama were cramming down the throats of the American people. Guess what? We went up there and we were successful. We fired Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. I voted 50 times to repeal, replace, dismantle, delay, and defund Obamacare. We've repealed some parts, but we're not done, and I'm not going to quit until it's completely off the books. We're $17.4 trillion in debt. I told you I was going to cut spending. Guess what? We've done that. We've cut spending 4 consecutive years in a row. A lot of people talk about cutting spending, but I actually did it. We've cut spending 4 consecutive years in a row. First time that's been done since the Korean War. But it's not enough. We have to address the #1 driver of our deficits and debts, and that's mandatory spending. Mandatory spending takes up 2/3 of our entire federal budget. We have to address that before it's too late. $600 billion is going to be what we're going to be paying in interest on our national debt by 2020 if we don't do anything. That's greater than our entire defense budget if we don't take steps now to fix that. That's why I introduced a balanced budget amendment 2 years ago, introduced it in the House. It was brought up, and it was defeated by Democrats. Well, all we were asking is to balance our budget. We asked families to balance their budgets. We asked the state of Mississippi to balance their budget. Is it too much to ask the federal government to balance their budget? We're working hard for you and your families. Now, on some local issues, I know some people were kind of concerned about the flood insurance rates going up. You know what? I heard from you. We fixed it. We capped the rates. We removed the home sales trigger. And we also got the grandfathering in, and we're going to hold FEMA accountable to the policy holders. A lot of people here know that South Mississippi is truly blessed to be such a military community. We're fortunate to have a lot of retirees that call South Mississippi home. We have active and guard installations, and we have a $1 billion defense industry. That's extremely important, not just to our economy, but it's important to our national security. Now, this president is hell-bent on gutting our military, along with his Democrat friends and allies in Washington, D.C. But I'm not going to let him balance the budgets on the backs of our men and women in uniform, who do so much for us to keep us safe at home and abroad. We should be investing more in defense, especially in light of the fact that the world is not becoming a safer place. It's becoming much, much, much more dangerous. Look at Russia, look at Syria, look at Libya, North Korea, Iran, and the list goes on and on. Now, some people have been asking me about the C-130Js. They asked me if the planes are leaving. Well, the Air Force has been trying to take those planes for 2.5 years, and they're still here in Biloxi, Mississippi. I've asked the tough questions of the Air Force when they wanted to move them to Dobbins. They couldn't answer them. They decided to leave them here. Then they decided to move them to Pope Army Airfield. Asked the tough questions, and again, they could not provide justification. And now they're trying to move them to Little Rock, Arkansas. It smells a lot like politics to me, because there's a vulnerable Senate Democrat up there that would love to have our planes to kind of boost his military creds. Well, you know what? The planes are still here. I've asked the Secretary of the Air Force to personally come down here to see firsthand how great our Air Force Base is, how great our airmen is, and how much we support our men and women in uniform. She's going to be down here in 2 weeks. And I've asked the Chief of the Air Force today, I said, when you talk to her, make sure she comes with an open mind, because I think you'll see just how important, what a national treasure Keesler Air Force Base is to South Mississippi. The president wants to cut our military budget, and I said no. Just last week before I came home, I basically secured funding for an amphibious assault ship. Why is that important? It's important to Ingalls Shipyard. It's important to the thousands of shipbuilders that work there. Thousands of jobs on the line. But most importantly, it's something that the Marine Corps need. Commandant Amos came to me personally and said, we need this to do our job, to do it safely, and to come back home to the ones that we love. We need this ship. We got it done, along with 2 DDG-51s. So I'm telling you all this because I want you to know that I'm working hard for you and your families, not just here at home, but also to keep us safe abroad. But in addition, I didn't go to Washington, D.C. just to sit back and vote and have a good time. I went to Washington, D.C. to work. That's why I'm on 3 committees, because I believe in working hard. And all 3 of those committees are important to South Mississippi. As a freshman, I was appointed chairman of the Space Subcommittee to Science, Space, and Technology. We have jurisdiction over NASA. We have Stennis Space Center right in our backyard. I just authored the NASA reauthorization, which will make sure that Stennis Space Center continues testing for decades to come. That's extremely important too, because in light of everything that's going on with Russia, they're trying to deny our human access to space. Many people didn't know that Russia controls America's access to space right now. We pay them $70 million a seat to send an American astronaut to the space station. That is unacceptable. We need to get back to sending our astronauts on American rockets from American soil. And also, to kind of wrap it up, you know, I'm rated the 21st most conservative member of Congress out of 435. That means I'm more conservative than more than 95% of my colleagues. I am the most conservative member of the Mississippi delegation. But you know what? I can still get things done, and I have. I'm running on my record. I'm proud of my record, and I would like to ask you for your support on June 3rd. And I want to thank you for your support and prayers of me and my family so I can continue fighting for you and yours. Thank you, and God bless.
The question to Congressman Palazzo, is it off? Is
dealing with immigration. Can you tell us your views on what the proper role of the federal government, and particularly within the Republican Party, should be over the next, say, 4 years in terms of immigration policy, if you see one coming out of Congress?
Well, absolutely. First of all, we need to secure our borders. That's first and foremost. And then we need to enforce the laws on the books and engage in an aggressive interior enforcement. Some people have, basically proposed hiring tens of thousands of new Border Patrol agents to go down to the border. I don't see any reason why we need to grow the size of the federal workforce when we have the answer right underneath our nose. If we're serious about securing the border, we should send our men and women of the National Guard down there. They've been fighting for over 12 years. They're familiar with basically, convoys, border protection, and things of that nature. And they're ready, they want to serve, and they serve gladly. We could surge to the border, get it secure, and then they could rotate back. And it would cost 1/3 of what the federal government proposes. Thank you.
All right, y'all have a good evening.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next candidate to speak will be Mr. Ron Vincent. He is a Mississippi State University Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering. He lived and worked in what was then communist Czechoslovakia, established trade business buying plastic resins in Czechoslovakia and selling them in Germany and France, and selling farm equipment and computers in Czechoslovakia. He started a trade business in Belarus, selling tobacco and food products, turning $100 million per year. He retired from General Electric as a field engineer in the power generation sector of GE. He is a U.S. Army veteran, honorably discharged, and he currently resides in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Ron Vincent.
Thank you, Deanna. I want to thank all of you, the Jackson County Republican Women, the Jackson County Republican Club. I want to thank you first for your support for our Republican Party and the hard work you do. This is a very active group down here, and we appreciate your efforts. Deanna has told you about most of the things I did, so I guess that was my introduction. I would have to say that I'm a native Mississippian. I was born in Hattiesburg, and I've got a birth certificate to prove it. Deanna said I was in communist Czechoslovakia for a while, so I have seen with my own eyes, up close and personal, socialism. I have seen the heartbreak it brings. I've seen socialized medicine and the tragedy that befalls people living under them. And the reason I'm running for Congress is because I see that coming here, and it scares the heck out of me. Somehow, we've got to put the brakes on this. One of the big things I would like to do is to overturn Obamacare. I would like to get rid of Obamacare. This is killing us. It's going to cost us our health care system. We have the best health care system in the world, and it's not even close. And Obamacare is bound and determined to destroy it. Health care, in my opinion, should be between a doctor and a patient, and everybody else just needs to butt out. Every Republican serving in the U.S. House campaigned on overturning Obamacare, but yet we still have it with us. Congressman Palazzo said he voted 50 times to repeal Obamacare, but those were show votes. They knew they were going nowhere. They died in the Senate, and everybody knew they were. But what happened when they got a real chance to do something about it, to defund it? They caved in and punted, and so we still have Obamacare, and we still have it to do. I'm also big in support for our military veterans. I'm a veteran myself. And I'm really upset by the fact that our current congressman voted for the omnibus spending bill, which cut the retirement pay of our military veterans, including the disabled vets. Food stamp benefits have gone up 30% overall with the current administration. But for seniors, the cost of living adjustments have barely increased in the last 5 years, a little more than 1%. We cannot balance the budget on the backs of our seniors and our veterans. That's the wrong way to go. If I had been Speaker of the House last year, Obamacare would have been defunded. We have the power to do it. We have a system of checks and balances in place, and the check on a runaway administration, and we definitely have an administration that's out of control, is the Congress, and their tool is the money. But our Republican leadership, for some reason, has chosen not to stand up and not to do it. And we still have a runaway administration. And I don't know how we're going to fix it if somebody doesn't stand up and do what they're supposed to be doing. So this is going to be a good speech. That's going to be a short one. And I thank you so much for listening to me. And I would appreciate your consideration on June 3rd. And thank you all for being here.
Mr. Benson, in regards to Obamacare, assuming it was repealed tomorrow, what would you advocate for something to replace it by, or would you work for even a more repeal of Medicare and Medicaid?
Well, I wouldn't work to repeal Medicare and Medicaid, but we don't need to replace Obamacare. We just need to get rid of it. It doesn't need to be fixed. It just needs to be gotten rid of. Obamacare is a perfect example of what happens when the government tries to fix something that's not broken. We had a leak in the roof and they tore the house down. We can do better than that.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Our next speaker will be Tom Carter. Mr. Carter is also a lifelong Mississippian residing in Career. He is married with 2 children. He received a Bachelor of Business Administration from Millsaps College in 1987. At the age of 23, Tom started his own company with a loan from his father. He grew his company into an $8 million per year business with 3 locations, creating numerous jobs during that period. In 2001, Tom was recruited by a global technology Fortune 500 company, which focuses on national defense contracting, and has worked his way up into an executive position which manages a portfolio of $1.25 billion in federal contracts. Mr. Tom Carter.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the club and I want to thank the ladies for having us here this evening. That's very nice of you. It gives us an opportunity for you guys to hear us and hear what we have to say. Guys, I'm a different candidate. And the way I'm a different candidate is I'm not a career politician. If that's what you're looking for, there are a couple of guys that are in this race that are career politicians. And they certainly need your vote. However, if you're looking for a different way, if you're looking for something that's tried and true, from a business perspective, I'm that guy. I am a federal contractor. I started my own company when I was a young man. I had an idea, had a dream. I jumped out in the middle of that, understanding risk was dangerous, and there's a lot of ways to fail. Business was tough, up and down, cyclical. But at the end of the day, I managed fairly well. From there, I went to work for Fortune 500. I work for them today. That company has multiple contracts with inside this district. And as I have worked for that company for 14 years, I've created thousands of jobs. In this district, I've created hundreds of jobs. Over at Stennis Space Center for NASA, and so on and so forth. I am an IT guy. I'm an engineer of technology. I'd like to take advantage of it and use it to the best of our abilities and the things that we can do with it. I understand managing large budgets and large numbers. One of the biggest problems we have today is our debt. Our debt is the #1 killer that we have. Our congressman before me said that we have $17.4 trillion in debt. He's 100% right. However, the #1 problem to our economy and to our way of life is the debt. The debt. If we don't do something to bring our debt into control, we're not going to be able to create jobs. And it's not just jobs we're talking about, folks. It's quality jobs. There are jobs out there, but they're not the jobs we want. They're not the jobs that are going to sustain people to go and build or buy a house. It's not going to change the lifestyles that we have. We don't have industry that are coming in here because we don't have an educational system that is breeding something that's new and different for each one of us. And we've got to move forward. We've got to move up. Our congressman also mentioned a couple of things that they have fixed, such as cutting spending 4 consecutive years. I'm having trouble finding those 4 consecutive years. We're still at $17.4 trillion. We were at $17.3 trillion. So that's not a very good cut. We've got to do the hard things. We've got to make the hard decisions when it comes to managing our country and our debt. We've got to make decisions on the agencies that not only are unconstitutional, they are not serving the functions of our populace. We've got to find a way to eliminate them. One of the things we have in our environment is we have regulatory agencies creating regulation. And this regulation is being used by the attorneys and the CPAs, and they're walking out and they're creating law in our courts based on regulation. This is not legislation, it's regulation. Prime example of that is Obamacare. Obamacare came out as a 2,000-page bill. It went to the Health and Human Services. When it got out of there, it was 22,000 pages, 20,000 pages of regulation that was not designed or developed by our legislation. That's what we have. We have an out-of-control government. Ronald Reagan said it best, government is the problem. The less government we have, the better we are. The more that we are able to take and utilize from our government to make our lives better, that's what it's there for. It's not the other way around. And there are too many congressmen, there are too many senators, we have an administration that believes that they get to legislate from the executive order, and that's got to change. At the end of the day, if we do not do something drastic quickly, we are broke. If you make $50,000 a year and you spend $60,000, you're broke. That's the same thing in our country. We make in revenue every year $2.2 trillion. That's been pretty steady for about 26 years, give or take $100 million a year. We are spending $3.6 trillion every year. So we have a deficit of about $1.4 trillion. Guys, we're broke. We need to recognize that. And your decisions and your votes need to be to fix that. Nothing else really matters. You talk about defense budgets. If we're broke, we can't afford to pay for our defense. If we're broke, we can't pay for Obamacare. I actually agree with Mr. Vincent that it is Obama kill, because it is a crusher on businesses. It's a crusher. It's a killer on people. It's horrible. We don't have a choice. We have to make the hard decisions. And you need somebody to do this that understands the numbers, that understands how to create and foster growth. There are natural resources we have in our own district that we're not taking advantage of. Prime example is over here at Texas Flat. That's just one area where we have a very rich environment that we could create an economic development pool of a host of services, a host of companies that we could bring in here. But there's things we got to do. We got to get light rail out there. We got to create an environment for training. There are more, and my time I can hear is running out. So we have quite a few things that we can do. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the time to talk to you. I appreciate you listening. My name is Tom Carter. I am a different candidate. I have never ran for office, never held office. I would ask you to consider voting for me on June 3rd in the Republican primary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. What is your position on so-called man-made climate change? And in that same vein, if you were in Congress, what would be the first several EPA regulations that you would look to legislate out of existence, besides the EPA itself?
Well, before I begin the answering, we did have clean water and clean air before we created the EPA. I believe we would have it after it, but I'll let that be what it is. Regulation. There's a program under the EPA called e-rulemaking. I encourage each one of you to go to the website and go look up e-rulemaking. That is a hodgepodge of regulation. There are over 300 plus agencies that feed into that environment. And they put all of their regulatory requirements right in e-rulemaking. And what happens is off of e-rulemaking, that's where your lawyers and your CPAs go to court to fight against legislation that's already been passed and signed and is in the law to change it for their better good. So The first thing that I would do is I would eliminate quite a bit of the EPA. I don't see the purpose for it. What it does is it does not add to the value of business. It takes business away. One of the things that we've constantly do is in this society is the free market constantly reinvents itself, and it checks and balances its own self. I think by doing that, we would allow our free market to grow faster and be much more stable. What we have now is we have ideas that are being suppressed. They're not allowed to move forward because there's regulation that's hindering it and stopping it. So from the EPA perspective, I really would try to eliminate most of it. There are certain portions of it that we can use. By the way, most people don't know, the EPA is a 25,000 personnel bureaucracy that is growing and growing. It's a $75 billion agency that is not fully mandated, nor is it funded. And so they have not cut their budget, and they are continuing to add. They are adding significantly to our deficit.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Our next candidate is Mr. Tavish Kelly. Mr. Kelly resides in Picayune. He is a graduate from Mississippi State in physics, math, and political science. He's a former chairman of the Pearl River Republican Party. He is currently pursuing a degree at University of Mississippi College of Law. He was an Eagle Scout, and he is currently the owner of Kelly Firearms, his family's gun manufacturing and retail business, and he is currently single. Tavish.
Hey everyone. Well, first I'd like to say I'm still an Eagle Scout. Once an Eagle Scout, always an Eagle Scout. But I'm a native here of the Gulf Coast, born in Gulfport, raised in Pass Christian, graduated from Pass High in 2006 as the valedictorian of the class. But as I've lived here, I've grown to have a real appreciation for South Mississippi. We really do have one of the best communities in the world, whether it's the water, the Pine Belt, or everything in between, and just the great friendly people here. I really love living here and being a Mississippian. And that's why I'm running, because I see our country headed in a dangerous direction, a direction that threatens to crush businesses, crush people, and starve them of the very lifeblood of the economy and of their interpersonal relationships. You know, you don't start making money every year until May, so congratulations, you're now earning. But the first 4 months are taken by the federal government as part of the income tax. Now, they actually take about half, and they give you some back, and they want you to be grateful for that. But you know what, I think they should take 0% of your income, because I think when you earn something, you deserve to keep that thing. And so I question the idea whether the government needs to take our income at all, because it didn't for the first 160 or so years of our country. And that's another thing that we need here in representation. We need leadership in Congress who are not just Republicans, but conservatives. And by conservatives, I mean people who appreciate the Constitution. It's the founding document of our country. It outlays the very manners and mechanics that our government is meant to follow. And if we stray away from that, well, we've descended into what the founders considered to be tyranny, and what I also would consider to be tyranny. We are a nation of laws, not ruled by men, but ruled by the enforcement of the natural rights endowed by our Creator unto man, to make us equal under the law and have equal rights vis-a-vis one another. And I think that we've seen a degradation of this principle within both the federal government as a whole and also within the Republican Party, unfortunately. The most recent example of this, and I think ongoing, is Speaker John Boehner, who I have major problems with. He continues to compromise with liberals on the growth of government, continues to back budgets that fund Obamacare and other unconstitutional agencies, budgets which Congressman Palazzo has voted for, by the way, to my disappointment. I think that the only way we're going to change anything in this country is if we replace the leadership in the House with a constitutional conservative who is actually determined, willing, and courageous enough to stand up for the Constitution. And I'm willing to go up there and vote for such a man. And I think that of all the people on this stage, and we've got some great guys up here, I have the most determination, the most courage, and the most knowledge of the Constitution. I think that if you send me to DC, you will not regret it, because I won't just be someone up there voting along with the party. I will be a leader, setting an example for other congressmen who wish to follow a constitutional voting manner, who wish to stand up for the people of their districts, stand up for the freedoms and the natural rights that make us what we are, free people. So I hope you can consider me. I've got information on the tables there. I'd be happy to talk to you after this. And of course, I'm going to answer a question here in a moment. But you can find more information at tavishkelly.com. And I hope you look for me on the ballot on June 3rd. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, this question is in regards to cost of living adjustments, COLAs. What is your position on Congress raising or decreasing COLA? And specifically, we saw recently when they voted to reduce the COLA increase for military retirement benefits. What would be your position on COLAs in general, and then particularly that for military retirees?
Well, when it comes to military retirees, you know, when you enlist in the military or when you're drafted, you sign a contract, and that contract guarantees certain benefits from the government. As a constitutional conservative, I am for strict enforcement of contracts under the law. I don't believe that anybody, especially the government, should be held to a higher standard than us individuals, should be able to violate the terms of a contract and get away from it. So for our veterans, they absolutely demand the respect and protection under the law that everyone else has when they sign a contract. They should get their cost of living adjustments. And I'm sorry to say that, again, Congressman Palazzo voted in January for the law that was mentioned, reducing cost of living adjustments for veterans. With regard to general cost of living, it would depend on the program. We have a lot of unconstitutional programs. Entitlements in general are not constitutional. That includes Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. With these programs, what I favor is refunding the money that's been paid into them via payroll taxes. You know, you pay 15% of your income per year into this system of entitlements. So I think you should get that money back, and then we should wipe away the system entirely. It wasn't constitutional when it was created during the New Deal. It's not constitutional today, and there's no need to let it stick around any longer.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Our next speaker will be Mr. Gene Taylor. He resides in Bay St. Louis, graduate of Tulane University, former member of the Bay St. Louis City Council, the Mississippi State Senate, and 4th Congressional District Representative, currently a member of the Hancock County Port and Harbor Commission, married with 3 children.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank the Jackson County Republican Party for putting this on. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. Particularly want to thank my wife, Margaret, my sister-in-law, Mary Laney, my old buddy from the Coast Guard, John Hughes, and all of you for being here tonight. I guess I could just about name everyone in this room, and I think I'm lucky in that capacity that I can do that. I've made some great friends over the years, particularly here in Jackson County. Still got this? In 1989, I was elected to Congress. In my first floor speech, I asked my colleagues to work together for a nation that lives within its means, a nation that respects all human life, including the unborn, a nation that honors its veterans and senior citizens, the very people who made this nation great, a nation that protects your right to bear arms, and a nation that is not afraid to say, "In God we trust." During the course of my career, I stayed true to every one of those principles. Along the way, I was able to do some other things, knowing that this is a district rich in military and rich in military retirees, and that a lot of those retirees felt like promises had been made to them and promises had been broken. Along with a lot of other good people, I led the fight to restore the promise of lifetime health care for our military retirees. That bill became known as TRICARE for Life. That was in the year 2000. A few years later, because of the incredible sacrifice being made by our guardsmen and reservists in Iraq and Afghanistan, at some points, almost half of the people in Iraq were guardsmen and reservists. I led the effort to expand TRICARE to every single drilling member of the Guard and Reserve, rather than just before and after a deployment, something that certainly they earned and something that our nation deserved to give them. When I found out that Mississippians and other Americans were needlessly dying in Afghanistan and Iraq from underbody explosions to their vehicles, I went and did an armored convoy with the Mississippi 155th and saw that just the day before, a young man by the name of William Brooks had lost both legs to an underbody explosion to his vehicle. I saw the concern on the troops and listened as my vehicle commander at every pile of rocks, every abandoned vehicle, every signpost screamed at the top of her lungs, IED, improvised explosive device, IED, IED. For the 20-mile combat tour, this young lady's yelling this about every 20 seconds. And I'm thinking, I'm going to do this for one day. This young lady has done this for 4 months, and she's going to do it for 8 more months if she's lucky. Something's got to change. I came home and led the fight in Congress with mine-resistant ambush protected vehicles. And with those vehicles, we saved thousands of lives and limbs in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's something a congressman does. It's not in the Constitution, Travis. But looking out for your folks is common sense. It's one of those things that we just ought to do. I'm proud of my work on the House Armed Services Committee, and towards the end of my career, I was actually the chairman of the Sea Power Subcommittee, the Shipbuilding Subcommittee. During the course of my years, I put over $40 billion worth of work in the Huntington Ingalls shipyard, and I'm proud of every penny of it. Helped them build over 1/2 of the surface ships in the United States Navy, and I'm very, very proud to have worked to restart the DDG-51 program, a program that was scheduled to have terminated about 5 years ago, working with then Chief of Naval Operations, Gary Ruffhead. We got it going, and that program will be the centerpiece of the Navy's fleet for the decade to come. You know, one of my opponents, Mr. Palazzo, has sent out a very cheap flyer that has superimposed me as a magician. Well, I want to thank, number one, the local Republican Party for getting him to appear with us, although he won't debate us. I'm sorry that he has already disappeared, but I think that one of the reasons he disappeared is he does not want to mention that he voted to raise your flood insurance rates by unlimited amounts when he voted for the Biggert Waters Act. That he voted to cut national defense by $490 billion when he voted with Nancy Pelosi for the Budget Control Act in August of 2011. A vote that directly is causing those planes to be released in Keesler Air Force Base, has directly resulted in the loss of jobs at Huntington Ingalls Shipyard, at the Air Guard Center, and now threatens the 155th, the National Guard unit that I rode with in Iraq. And then Sandy relief. Good gosh. After what the rest of the nation did for South Mississippi, contributing $21.7 billion in funds that Thad Cochran, Trent Lott, and I got for South Mississippi, when you consider the thousands of volunteers that came down here and helped out for a day, a week, a month, a year, what the rest of the nation did for us, when a bill went to the House floor to just pay the flood claims, the flood insurance claims and nothing else for the victims of Hurricane Sandy, Stephen Palazzo voted no. So as far as I'm concerned, that's 3 really good reasons he should have disappeared tonight, and 3 really good reasons he should no longer be serving in Congress. I'm asking for the opportunity to go back and go to work for a balanced budget, for a nation that lives within its means, for a nation that respects all human life, a nation that has a strong national defense and takes care of the people that served us by serving them, and a nation that is not afraid to say, in God we trust. I'm honored to have made so many friends with you over the years and to work with guys like Pete Pope, been chided by people like Father Kitchens, worked with Doug Holden and Linda when we built the home port out here at Pascagoula. Understand the importance of our federal infrastructure in South Mississippi. The 1,000 ships a year that call on the port of Pascagoula can only do it because the nation dredges that channel to 40 foot deep and keeps it dredged at that depth. The English shipbuilding would not be there. The ships they built could not sail if we didn't have that channel. So what we do is important. The water lines that we help get, the sewer lines we help get after Hurricane Katrina, the Ocean Springs, Biloxi Bridge, about $300 million. All these things are important. And all these things don't just happen. You need a congressman who's going to fight for you to make them happen. I was very proud to have been able to do that for you for 21 years. I'm asking for that opportunity again. Thank you.
This question is in regards to the federal budget and the deficit. What are your thoughts on the deficit as a threat to national security, and what steps would you take specifically to balance the federal budget and eliminate or greatly reduce the deficit?
The greatest reply I heard to what is the biggest threat facing America came from Admiral Mullen, former Chief of Naval Operations. At the time, he was Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, he's before the House Armed Services Committee, and they say, Admiral, what's the biggest threat to our nation? He could have named any number of threats. His answer was the deficit. And with that, I totally agree. My answer to that is how to fix it is with a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. I'm very proud that in 1995, I was part of the successful effort, and to the best of my knowledge, the only successful effort to pass the balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution that passed the House. It went to the Senate. It failed by one vote. One vote. It got 65 votes. It needed 66. What we need to do is pass a balanced budget amendment so that no matter who is in the White House, no matter who's running the House, no matter who's running the Senate, these are the ground rules. The same rules your mayors live by, your county supervisors live by, your state legislators live by. It ought to be the same rule that the United States of America lives by. You spend no more than you take in, with the sole exception of the nation being at war. Thank you all very much.
We're going to go slightly different here in that we do not have either candidate that is running for the Senate. And the third Senate candidate, Thomas Carey, was to be here and he was not able to join us. So we have representatives from both Senator Chris McDaniel and Senator Thad Cochran. So because they are not the candidate, we will not be asking them a direct question. So we're going to just give them some time to address you. I think Michael Watson. You can say if you need it on. Go ahead.
Good deal. Okay, our next speaker will be Senator Michael Watson for candidate Senator Chris McDaniel. Senator McDaniel represents District 42 in Mississippi State Senate in his second term. He's a graduate of William Carey University and University of Mississippi Law School. He had a federal clerkship for the U.S. District Court Judge Charles W. Pickering Sr. He's a partner with Hortman, Harlow, Basie, Robinson, McDaniel. He's a former host on the Right Side radio show on WMXI 98.1 in Hattiesburg. He is married with 2 children, and he currently resides in Ellisville, Mississippi. Senator Watson.
Thank you very much, and thank you much for, you can clap, it's okay, come on. Look, Chris obviously would love to have been here tonight, and I'll tell you this, the closest thing that you can have to someone who could not be here as a candidate is someone who's known that candidate closely now for 7 years. When I was running for office back in 2007, I had a conversation with then Chancery Judge Randy Pierce, who's now Supreme Court Justice, and we were sitting down and he said, look, if you're fortunate enough to win this race and you pull this off, I'm gonna tell you right now who's gonna be your closest friend in Jackson. I said, who's that? He said, it's a guy named Chris McDaniel. And I said, really, well, why is that? He said, I'm just telling you, when you get to Jackson, Chris gets to Jackson, I want you to sit down and talk to him, meet him, get to know him, you're gonna be very close. I can't tell you how correct he was in that judgment. I remember the first time I met Chris and Jill, Lauren and I sat down and had dinner with them. It was a freshman dinner. We were kind of getting to know each other, spending time together, and just hit it off right off the bat. And I could tell some things about him that have really proven themselves over the years. And it's his character, it's his integrity, it's his love for Mississippi, his love for his family, and his love for God. He's as rock solid as they come. And I've watched Chris work in the last 7 years, and there have been issues that we've had to work together on, gotten ditches together and fought together with. And there are some issues that really impact Mississippi, but they project across the nation as well. And there are some things that I think we're going to see in the future that we're going to have to continue these fights. And here specifically in Mississippi, some of the issues that I want to mention to you that I fought side by side with Chris on and watched him work, watched how he takes issues apart. He intelligently breaks them down, thinks through them, and then has a plan of attack, and that's how he works. So the very first one, our freshman year, illegal immigration. the very first piece of legislation reform in Mississippi dealing with illegal immigration was Chris McDaniel, myself, and Senator Lee Yancey. And so we took a bill apart, we picked the best pieces of it, we looked at what was happening around the country. How do you put a piece of legislation together in Mississippi that addresses the issue on both sides, not just the illegal immigrants coming to Mississippi, but also on those businesses that are attracting them here. You can't just punish one side, so we worked on legislation with that. Eminent domain, you all remember that fight, huge fight in the legislature. Chris made a speech that day in Jackson. I remember walking off the floor, talking to Senator Gillott, some of the guys that have been there so just a long time. Every one of them said, I've never heard more impassioned, better speech on the Senate floor than that one Chris McDaniel just made for private property rights. To see him fight for those type issues, I know what he believes in, and again, I know he loves our state. Voter ID, the next one. Another great fight that we engaged in on the floor. And it was a hard-fought battle. And we, again, were able to get that done. Fiscal conservative, I've watched him in the budget. He first served on the Finance Committee with me, and then there were some senators who left, and he got transferred to the Appropriations Committee. So I've seen him on the tax side, and then I've seen him on the appropriations side. Again, I know how he works, I know how he thinks. We talk about living within our means. That's what Chris McDaniel does. That's what he's exhibited in the Mississippi State Senate. And I know good and well that's what he'll exhibit at the federal level. So you look at the things that we're facing right now, and a lot of people say these are dark days in our country. Can we turn it around? Can we get this thing going in the right direction again? I say yes. Now how is that going to happen? We all have to understand we're all going to feel some pain. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. We're going to have to make hard decisions. We're going to have people that get elected and sent to Washington that aren't there for re-election, but there to do the right thing, no matter what. If it costs them an election because they did the right thing, thank God they're there. That's the kind of man Chris McDaniel is. You talk about other issues, constitutional conservative. He was a clerk in the federal court. He knows the Constitution. He studied it backwards and forwards. There are times when I go to the state senate, and outside of maybe Charles Busby and myself and a few others, he's the smartest guy there. Kidding, not me. Maybe Charles. But Chris is an intellect, very smart. So to watch him break down the constitutional issues, even at the state level, has been quite impressive. So he knows the United States Constitution. And he will tell you if there's an issue that does not fit with the United States Constitution, he's not going to support it. Period. Point blank. He's a man of his word. He has stood by everything he said. This is what I believe in. This is how I'm going to vote. I promise you, Chris McDaniel is the right choice for now. Every generation has had to take the mantle and lead the charge. It's time for us. It's time for Chris McDaniel. He's a good man. He's a great Christian. He's got integrity. He's got character. And he's a great leader. And he will serve us well in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Watson. Our final speaker will be for Senator Thad Cochran. We have Mr. Joe Cloyd. Senator Thad Cochran is a lifelong Mississippian, currently residing in Jackson. He has a JD from University of Mississippi. He is a Navy veteran. He was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1972. He was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1978. He is currently serving as the ranking Republican on the Senate Agricultural Committee, and he chaired it in 2003 to 2005. He is currently serving on Appropriation Committee. He chaired that from 2005 to 2007. And he is the ranking Republican on the Defense Subcommittee. He is married with 2 children. Mr. Cloyd?
Thank you, Deanna. Good evening. My name is Joe Cloyd, and I live in Ocean Springs. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Senator Thad Cochran's campaign. Senator Cochran regrets that he's unable to be here tonight as the U.S. Senate is in session this week. The Cochran campaign could not find a surrogate as handsome as Senator Watson, so unfortunately that means you're going to have to listen to me for a few minutes. Before I begin, I don't want us to forget about what President Reagan said, that a person that agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally
not a 20% enemy and traitor. We're nearing the end of a contentious primary, and no matter the outcome, we have to work together to ensure Republican victory in Mississippi for the U.S. Senate and the 4th District. I recognize there is frustration around the direction of our country, and in many cases, I agree. The best and possibly the only way to change our country's direction is for Republicans to take back control of the U.S. Senate this year. Senators Cochran and Wicker have voted to repeal Obamacare 100 times, but Republicans aren't in control of the Senate, so obviously we don't have enough votes to make a change there. Congressman Palazzo in the House have repeatedly voted to repeal Obamacare and can't make it past the Senate. Why? Because the Democrats still control the Senate. Republicans take back the Senate and Obamacare can go away for good. And then we have to take the White House back in 2016, and I'm sure that's one thing we all agree on. That leads me to why I'm supporting Senator Cochran for re-election and why I hope you will too. Senator Cochran has done so much for the state and the coast and specifically for Jackson County, but I'm just going to focus on 3 issues, one in the past, one in the present, and one in the future. The past. I know everyone in this room remembers the calamity that Hurricane Katrina brought to the Mississippi Gulf Coast in August of 2005. I lost my home and office in Biloxi, as did many of y'all here. Tough times for us all. Immediately after the storm, our federal delegation rallied behind Governor Barber to bring immediate aid and resources for long-term recovery. All of our representatives played a role, but the lion for the coast was Senator Cochran. At the time of Katrina, Senator Cochran chaired the Appropriations Committee, which he stands to chair once the Republicans can take back the Senate this year. He delivered for us when we needed him most. Of course, he had help and the support of the Mississippi state representatives and the federal delegation. But where would we be without the resources that he brought to bear that day, or on that vote? No Biloxi or Bay St. Louis Bridge, municipal and county government buildings still in trailers, tens of thousands of homeowners unable to rebuild because they had flooded, although they didn't live in a floodplain. All in all, a much slower recovery than we otherwise would have had. Now, how did he do it? He didn't stir up a fight. He didn't give a big, beautiful, dramatic speech. He quietly led, and he clearly delivered. Because of the respect that other senators around the country have for Thad Cochran's credibility, he was able to lead the charge to make sure the Gulf Coast received the disaster relief that it needed, without one opposing vote in the entire U.S. Senate. Simple, effective leadership, help when we needed it most. Reagan said peace is not an absence of conflict, but it is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. This quote reminds me of how Senator Cochran effectively delivered for Mississippi after Katrina, as he has over the years. Now in the present, Senator Cochran, supported by other Republican and Democrat senators, worked with Palazzo in the House to amend the Biggert Waters Act. The act in its original form was detrimental, as was mentioned earlier, to current and future development on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and across the whole nation. For the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, to be sustainable in the long term, it does have to be actuarially sound, but the adjustments needed to the program could not happen overnight without dire consequences. Sound, effective leaders stepped up and amended the act so that the adjustments would be phased in. I appreciate Senator Cochran, Senator Wicker, and Palazzo's leadership and delivery on this very important Mississippi issue. I also appreciate their leadership as it relates to the Restore Act, which will help the coast economy and environment recover after the BP oil spill. Going forward in the future, it's no secret that the defense industry and the military are critical to both our national defense and our coastal economy. As the only veteran in this primary, Senator Cochran clearly understands this. The state's largest employer, Ingalls Shipbuilding, is located here in Jackson County. Senator Cochran's been a steadfast supporter of the defense industry throughout his career. Just ask the industry. To our west, we have Keesler and Stennis. Both have billion-dollar annual economic impacts to our local economy. Both bases are vital to our local economy and to our nation's defense. In 2017, the military will go through another round of BRAC. Congressman, you remember that? base realignment and closures. Mississippi has many bases at risk during this process. Stennis, Keesler, Shelby, the list goes on. Who do you want representing you in the with BRAC right around the corner? The Senate Appropriations Chair, who has a track record of delivering for Mississippi when we need him, or a young senator ready to fight? I choose proven, effective leadership every time, and I hope that you will too. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to vote on June 3rd.
Yeah, since we're running a little ahead of schedule, we want to make sure everyone receives the price of admission that you paid to come tonight. What Denise and I thought we'd do, if it's all right with our 4th District congressional candidates, is have a round of questions. It would be the same question, and maybe just give each of you a maximum of 2 minutes to answer. No hard balls, just some questions that I'm sure you have thoughts on. So if that's all right with the candidates, we'll do that maybe for a couple of rounds until we get close to 7 o'clock, and then we'll ask. I know we have several candidates for sheriff here with us tonight. We'll ask them to just simply stand up and tell us their name and any other comments they may have, and we'll conclude at 7 or a little after 7 and give you time to mingle with the candidates and each other as well. So if that's all right with everyone, we'll get started, and we'll just pass the microphone this way and then have it come this way with the next round of questions. The first question we have is, what do you consider the most significant threat to human dignity and individual freedom in America, and how would you propose to go about remedying that threat? Mr. Carter, we'll start.
One more time on the question.
What do you consider the most significant threat to human dignity and individual freedom in America, and what would you do to go about helping to remedy that threat?
Thank you. That's our Constitution and the way that we are trampling on it every day. We have multiple agencies that are inside our that we utilize that are not constitutional, and we are trampling over our rights from our Bill of Rights on 4th. It would be the elimination of being able to actually talk about our Constitution on the floor of the legislation, in which it's not supposed to be talked about anyway. Once it was written, it is law. It's our law of the land. We don't have constitutional rights. We have inherent rights that are endowed to us by our Creator. The Constitution is the protection of those rights. And that is the biggest liberty that I see that is facing us today.
Well, I have to agree with Tom for the most part. Like I said earlier, the Constitution is the most important document when it comes to determining what's right and wrong in our government. And I think that the attitude that government and essentially moving people around and picking them up and placing them where you want them to be because you think it'll work better, and the idea that that's okay, that's the most dangerous thought when it comes to threatening our liberties and freedoms. When you start treating people like things to be moved around and made higher or lower because you don't like the way that they currently look, the idea that from each according to his ability and to each according to his need, this sort of idea of taking everybody as a group and then melding them until they're homogeneous, which of course was the underlying idea behind Karl Marx and communism, is one of the greatest threats, and it's still prevalent today in America, unfortunately. And the best way to work against it is to send people to DC and to Jackson who are just willing to stand up and to say no, no, and hell no to anything that is going to trample on our freedoms and our rights.
We'll pass the microphone now to Mr. Vincent. Again, the question is, what do you see as the most significant threat to human dignity and individual freedom in America, and what would you do to remedy it?
Well, I think if the nation went broke, it would be beneath all of our dignity. And I think that one of the biggest problems we have is excessive spending in Washington, D.C. We're just wasting tons of money in a lot of places. I just cannot imagine some of the things that happen, some of the places we're spending money on in Washington, D.C. You know, last year, the Obama administration spent nearly $2 million to teach Chinese hookers how to hold their liquor. That's a true story, folks. I'm not making this up. I think Nancy Pelosi said we had to cut the budget to the bare bones. I don't know, Nancy. I'm not sure about that one. But we've got to do something to cut spending, and we're wasting money. It's already been pointed out we're $17.2 trillion in the hole, and it's continuing to rise. We've got to cut that back. Our economy cannot stand the assault on it. With the wasteful spending, with TARP 1, TARP 2, TARP 3, with all of the stimulus programs that haven't worked, the unemployment is still a problem, and that's beneath most people's human dignity. We need to put people back to work. That's a great place to do things. We don't need to, and we need to close the border so that we can have people, so we can put people back to work. We've got too many people here that are not working, that are riding in the wagon. We need more people to get out and pull the wagon. Thank you very much.
First, I want to compliment all of the other candidates. I think you've all made some great points. I'm probably the closest to Mr. Vincent in that I think it's twofold as far as human dignity is concerned. He's right that if our nation goes broke, there will be no Social Security. If our nation goes broke, there will be no Medicare. There will be no Medicaid for people at the tail end of their lives. And I think those of us who are old enough remember a nation where our senior citizens were destitute. We certainly don't want that to happen again. That is certainly a threat to their dignity. I think at the other end of the spectrum, the Roe versus Wade decision by the United States Supreme Court, for the unborn, that person never had a chance to have a dignified life. So my solution, in agreement with Mr. Vincent, is the need for a balanced budget amendment for the nation to live within its means so that this generation does not bankrupt my grandchildren. On the other end, Congress needs to overturn the Roe versus Wade decision.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. If you don't mind, we'll start here and then work our way back in this direction. Next question is, how as a country do we ensure that American energy is more abundant, reliable, and affordable? What are our policies that we need to ensure that are in place as a nation?
Well, obviously, this area understands the need for energy independence. The world's greatest destroyer is built about 10 miles from here. The world's greatest destroyer runs out of fuel every 3 days. If it's not refueled, it can't even defend itself. So we obviously have to have energy independence to take care of the United States military that's protecting us. After Katrina, we all saw what life was like without electricity. It wasn't much fun. We certainly need to have enough electricity going forward to take care of the country. And one of the ways that I think we need to do that is obviously what we're doing now is working, that the amount of gas, petroleum production in our nation is going up, the amount of coal production in our nation is going up. But we need to also try to reserve as many of those jobs as we possibly can for Americans. One loophole in the law that I was able to pass through the House that unfortunately did not make through the Senate. We have a law right now that says that coastwide commerce by shipping has to be an American-made, American-crewed, American-flagged vessel. Unfortunately, the rig that blew up the Deepwater Horizon was built overseas. Most of those rigs operating in the American exclusive economic zone are built overseas. So one of the things that I would do to not only encourage American energy independence, but also to encourage American jobs, was to bring up an amendment that I passed to a bill shortly after the Deepwater Horizon, which said that those rigs that operate in the American exclusive zone have to be built in America. And that would mean work for people like Signal Marine, it would mean work for people like VT Halter, it would mean work for people here in Jackson County. It would be a step towards energy independence. It would be a step towards creating more American jobs for work that's being done in America. And by the way, the rig should be inspected by the United States Coast Guard instead of Lloyd's of London. Thank you.
Well, my solution would be to drill here, drill now. That's the short answer. The Democrats have been telling us, oh, you can't do that, it'll take 5 years. Well, we've been saying this for 20 years, we should have been started back then. We've got plenty of energy here. We don't need to be paying $500 billion a month, by a year for foreign oil. We have enough, we have our own oil. The solution to our problem is to drill our own oil. We also need to build the Keystone Pipeline. This is ridiculous. That should be built, that will save us a whole lot of money. And we can probably rein in the Department of Energy. Do you remember the Department of Energy was started under the Carter administration? And do you remember the excuse that was given to create the Department of Energy? Is to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. Now that's worked out really good, hasn't it?
Mr. President, I'll pass the microphone to my right. Again, the question is, as a country, how do we make American energy more affordable, reliable, and abundant? Mr. Kelly.
When something's expensive, there's generally one source of that, and it's regulation. Anytime the government interferes in markets, it drives up costs, drives down supply. We know this. We've seen it happen with the Soviets. Of course, you can't get more regulated than it is with communism. And we saw how that basically made all of their crops and all their food supplies dry up, and we had mass starvation in those countries. If we want to bring down the cost of energy in the U.S., we've got to get rid of regulations. Got to get rid of them for oil, for coal, for natural gas, even for solar, and there's not much regulations in solar and green energies. But any regulations that are there, we've got to sweep it out of the way. We've got to lower corporate taxes. We currently have the highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world, and that's got to come down if we want businesses to invest here, energy companies to invest here, develop more technology. As Ron mentioned, the Department of Energy, and that's something that's got to go. It's not constitutional at all. Neither is the EPA. I want to ask you guys, do you know when the last nuclear plant was built here in the U.S., when ground was broken? The year was 1977. 1977. That's almost 40 years ago that we last built a nuclear power plant. Nuclear energy is cheaper and safer and cleaner than any other energy source in the world. The rate of incidence is far lower than with coal, with gas, or with any other type. And yet we do not allow anybody to invest in nuclear energy here, which is safer than it's ever been in the history of man. We've got to have nuclear energy come back. You know, Mississippi actually gets quite a bit of its energy from nuclear plants. If we allow investors to build these plants again, energy will drop to an all-time low. We won't be complaining about power bills anymore. We'll have too much electricity. We won't know what to do with it. So again, the answer in every case is get rid of regulation and let the market work. Let the market create jobs, let it create energy, let it lower prices, and let it make America better in every way.
Thanks, Tavish. Glad you've been reading my material. I would start off with our taxes first, guys. Tavish did hit on something I staunchly agree with, and that's our corporate taxes. One of the problems we have is we have a tax code that's bloated, it's overgrown, it's unsustainable. It's 60,000 pages, and each one of you have read it, I'm sure, because you're free Americans. Nobody told you April 15th what you owed. You knew what you owed, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. My point is, we need to get to something different, something flatter, something fairer. I actually support the fairtax.org. Go and look at that. That way you can see what that is. That's private funded, $22 million of developing a way to eliminate our tax code. What it does, it actually strips away a lot of our corporate tax, a lot of our raw taxes that build up our product services. For instance, your gas is $3.55 a gallon. I think that's what it is right now. But it's $3.33. Okay, good. $3.33 a gallon. I buy diesel, so it's $3.61. So that tax on that gas is 60%. 30% of that is state, 30% of that is federal. Fairtax.org would eliminate that. You would go and buy your tax at the raw. You'd go and buy your gas at the raw rate, and then you would pay a 30% fee. All right, that 30% fee would be the tax. That's a consumption tax. Buy as you go. Fairtax.org. You're right now saying, well, but I'm still paying income tax. No, Fairtax.org eliminates the 16th Amendment, which eliminates your federal income tax. So now, when you go buy a car, you would pay a 30% tax on that, but you're not paying an income tax. So if you make money, you can go spend money and you pay more. Vice versa is the other way too. It's fair tax. That's the first thing we got to do in order to create the environment that this question's asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. The last question, I think we have time for one more, is if you believe that America is still the bright, shining city on the hill for the rest of the world, what do you see as our country's future in terms of our engagement with the rest of the world? Do we have a moral imperative to be engaged, or is our moral imperative to be more isolation and more inward focus? Mr. Harder, do you mind if we start with you?
No, thank you.
Let's see. The first thing that, as I understand the question, we can't go and police another state, another country, when we're $17.4 trillion in debt. We can't afford our military if we can't pay our bills. At the end of the day, each one of you are just like that. It's no different. You can't pay your power bill if you're not making enough money. We're basically giving away 1% of GDP to foreign countries that hate us, by the way. Let's make sure we're real clear on that. And that's supposed to make us feel better, I guess. There are treaties in place. There are things that we're doing with that money in order to make it a safer world, and I understand that. But I can't understand why we would take the pearl that I love so much, the shiny pearl, and give it away to open borders, to give it away to other countries that are hell-bent on destroying us any way possible. So it would be an inward focus first, is what we need to do is eliminate any of our debt. We need to get a balanced budget going, then we can afford some of the things that we're trying to do. We also have promises that we've made to our military. A promise made is a promise to be kept. I'm a man of faith, and my Bible tells me, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. So if we're going to tell our military that we're going to give you benefits, then we don't cut those benefits. We mandate those. We pay for those. But that has to come under a balanced budget amendment. Our military, right here in Jackson County, as we build ships and a host of other things, has got to be funded in order to keep us safe. The government has a requirement to keep us safe and to protect us. And the only way they do that is through our military. And our budgets are out of hand. I mean, I see our congressmen and our United States senators thinking that this is bubblegum money and they can do whatever they want to when they want to do it, and they can't. At the end of the day, guys, we're broke. I mean, it's hard facts, and you're not hearing it, I don't think, on the stump very much from a lot of other folks, but if I ran my business like this, I'd have been fired a long time ago, not just recently. That's the problem we have with our Congress. They don't seem to understand that if we make $2.2 trillion, we do not spend $3.6 trillion. It can't happen. So if we're gonna give foreign aid, that 1% GDP has got to come under our budget.
Well, I agree with him on foreign aid. Though if we did have the money, I still wouldn't support it. It's unconstitutional. And again, that is the bottom line when it comes to our government. Now, when it comes to defense, obviously the Constitution does allow for defense. It actually even allows for us to upgrade our vehicles in the military, Gene. It's right there in Article 1, Section 8. You can look it up. But what I want to say is, John Quincy Adams, when he was Secretary of State, he issued an address on the 4th of July. And the entire purpose of the address was to talk about foreign policy and what the foreign policy of our founders was. And this is what he said. He said, "America does not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. She is the well-wisher of democracy and freedom everywhere, but the champion and vindicator only of her own." And what he meant by that was, our national defense is for our nation. We are not supposed to be subsidizing the defense of the rest of the world. We're supposed to be protecting Americans, and to that degree, I support bringing most of our armed services home to this country so they can be with us, defending us here within our borders. We can leave the Navy to patrol the seas, as does every other country who has a Navy. That's not a problem. What I care about is I don't support the occupying of other countries. It does not lead to a safer world. It actually provokes attacks on us. And no, those attacks are not justified. However, we shouldn't provoke them all the same. You know, if you've got a yard with a dog growling at you, you don't stroll into that yard and poke the dog in the face. You stay away, and if the dog comes after you, that's when you go after it. We need to act more responsible. We need to act sensible. We need to treat people around the world like human beings that we want to get along with, and yet keep our keep our arms and our wits about us in case they try to attack us. So we need an even, balanced foreign policy where we're neither the policemen of the world, nor do we isolate ourselves from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Again, the question, and this will be our last one, the question is, if you believe that America is still the beacon of hope and freedom around the world, what do you see our nation's proper role in engaging in world affairs and in other nations?
Well, I really think that Ronald Reagan's shining city on the hill is still there. The lights are getting dim. But I think we can turn the lights on, and we can restore Ronald Reagan's shining city on the hill back to its former glory, and that's what we need to do. And how we fix it is not rocket science. We just need to get our government under control. We need to restore our freedom and liberty, and return to constitutional government. It is not rocket science. And the way you do that is by sending strong, rock-ribbed men and women to Congress to do what they're supposed to be doing, to serve the people that they represent. If we do that, we can put the brakes on this runaway government, we can put the brakes on spending, and we need to do that. We need to clean up our own economy before we try to do anything else around the world. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. A couple of quick thoughts. First is peace through strength. You cannot prevent every war, but you can prevent a lot of wars if you are perceived as being stronger than your enemy. And in my 21 years in Congress, I saw to it that we were stronger than any potential foe. Second is a quote from a gentleman from South Mississippi who spent 7 years in the Hanoi Hilton, Colonel George Robert Hall, and it was during the debate in 1988 when he said the best weapon is the one that's never used. Through a strong military, we can hopefully prevent a war, but of course there will be things like 9/11. And lastly, since so much talk has been made of the Constitution, it is time for Congress to take back its constitutional duty to declare war. The United States Congress has not declared war since December of 1941. Since that time, there has been a war in Korea where 50,000 people died, a war in Vietnam, wars in the Gulf, a war in Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan. Each one of these times, it was a presidential directive passed on by Congress that said a use of force resolution. No, that's chicken. Quite frankly, the most awesome responsibility a congressman has is to decide where and when to send other young Americans off to die. Great young Americans like Anthony McDaniel, who went to high school down the street, Gautier High School. 1 year as a basketball star at Gautier High. 2 years later, he's a triple amputee. Great young Americans like Sean Cooley from the Lucedale area with the Mississippi National Guard, one of the first to die in the Iraq conflict. Major Green, whose funeral was across the street not that long ago. Greatest responsibility of any congressman is deciding when and where Americans are chosen to defend us. And that constitutional responsibility has to go back to Congress. Congress has to be involved in that decision. Congress has to lead in that decision. And I'm asking for the opportunity to go back and look after for people like Sean, look after people like Anthony, people like Major Green, those who have served, those that will serve, and those that are serving now. We need to honor them by never wasting one of their lives, one of their limbs needlessly.
Thank you, gentlemen. We are going to acknowledge our sheriff's candidates, but I want to make one observation. Mississippi has probably the biggest group of handsome men running for office, so Jackson County Republican women would like y'all to know that we voted, and y'all are the handsomest ones that we've known. So, sheriff candidates in the room. Shall we bring the microphone to them, or?